All right, welcome back, everybody. We have an exciting episode today on the Wknd Warriors Fishing Podcast. We are visited by Dallas from Anglers Atlas and the MyCatch app. Recently, they are very well known for Walleye Wars, bass battles, and obviously the multi-species tournament that's increasingly growing this year. Thanks for taking the time out of your day, Dallas, to sit down with us.
No problem at all. I'm happy to be here.
Sweet. So I guess I think I should hop in here just because I've mentioned before on here that I have a part-time job with MyCatch, and so if you haven't put it together yet, me and Dallas work together, helping on calls and stuff, and so this is I guess how the connection kind of started there. I've been working with Dallas for I guess almost 2 years now, so got to know each other a little bit over that time, but we thought that it would be awesome to get you on here to talk about we've been talking about the multi-species madness and Walleye Wars, like Brandon said, and kind of whenever there's a new one coming up, we kind of talk about it on the pod, and so we thought why not get, like we had Shayna on earlier before the multi-species madness started, but we figured why not get you on here, Dallas, just with how many different Walleye Wars there are going on, and I know we have listeners across Canada and Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, and that's kind of where you've got the Walleye Wars expanded to now, so I guess just for the people that don't know you or haven't heard of you before, do you want to maybe just explain like kind of where you got your start in fishing, and then I guess how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, for sure. So on the fishing end, so I grew up half hour north of Swift Current in a town called Cabri, and I got my start in fishing as early as I could walk because of my dad. Most people who walleye fish in Saskatchewan will know him or at least know his name, Bob Kirkpatrick. He's fished tournaments in Saskatchewan, walleye tournaments since they've existed. Many of the tournaments he's either never missed or at least been there since the start. As of this year, he's the only person to have fished every single premiers left. So he got into tournaments kind of when they started in the late 80s, and I was born in 91, so he also hosted a TV show back in the 90s called Gone Fishing. I was born the same year that started, so it was right from the start for me, and I fished my first tournament at 6 years old, and I never missed a year until 2020 with COVID. It was my first non-tournament year, so I've been doing tournaments forever. On the work side of things, I went to the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon and got a marketing degree, and then I worked at Post Media through the Star Phoenix in Saskatoon for 5 years as a media sales consultant, and then started with Anglers Atlas about 3.5 years ago, and that's kind of how I got into this position. Shortly before I started was when the MyCatch app actually launched, but we were a long ways away from anything to do with tournaments at that point. The tournament thing really kicked into gear in 2020 when COVID happened. So, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But basically that's my story. I unfortunately don't do nearly enough recreational fishing. I've tried to change that this year. I've been doing good. I've done more recreational fishing this year than I have since I was a kid. Most of my fishing historically has been in tournaments just because I've always had other things going on. I've played hockey my whole life, school, work. I got a young family, so there's only so many days in the week and so much time in the calendar. So, but I'm doing my best to increase that now, in addition to the tournament stuff. So,
yeah, for sure. I think that's the huge thing is finding that balance. And like you said, when you have a young family, you kind of probably a little bit of nostalgia there, wanting to kind of get them into that as well, right? I've seen a couple of your posts where you guys have had it head out, and I guess with your new boat too, that I guess we could talk about that too, that you just got as well. It's a pretty nice looking rig. So I think that's what's important is I guess finding that balance as well. But I guess for some of the people listening, do you want to maybe explain, because I know when I started at Anglers Atlas at MyCatch, it's kind of seemingly interchangeable, right? It's kind of the two things. Would you maybe want to explain the difference between the two there?
Sure, yeah. So I usually defer to Sean, our president at Anglers Atlas, to give the Anglers Atlas history, but I've heard it enough times I can probably do it some justice. So Anglers Atlas has been around for I think 22 years. Really started, it was all about mapping and fishing maps, and that's still a really big part of our business. For many years, for most of that, we've done regional magazines across the country. When I started, we had 21 regional magazines all across Canada that we put out, centered around the fishing maps, but also lots of fishing editorial and related topics like that. Shortly after I started, we sort of transitioned. The online part became a really big part of it. We get over 1 million hits annually to the Anglers Atlas website, really centered around that mapping again, individual lake pages and such. That part of the business has really shifted online, but Anglers Atlas has been around for a couple of decades. The MyCatch app, which is an Anglers Atlas property, started little before, a few months or 6 months before I started. So the MyCatch app was not designed as a tournament app originally. It was a personal catch log with a citizen science spin where anglers could contribute data, keep it for themselves, keep it for their own records, and keep their own logbooks essentially virtually on the app. But also the data that they input is then used for scientific purposes and research purposes. And we can talk more about that as well. But that was what the app was intended for. Obviously, when I came aboard, I saw right away the ability to, I kind of started putting the wheels in motion to have a tournament component to this app, just because I knew it was already there. The app and the technology mostly was there. But realistically, we'd had those discussions, and we were it was sort of like we were planning on phasing this in over a couple of year period, adding these features, and to some point in the future, we were going to be able to host tournaments on the thing. But it was really a distant goal at the time, and right around shortly after that discussion, COVID hit, and suddenly all of our tournaments are gone. There's a need for this, right? And so and the magazine business subsequently was going down pretty fast at the same time. So we kind of just shifted our focus, put it into overdrive, did a couple of hard months of development, and got the app to where it needed to be to start running tournaments. And we ran our first tournament in May 2020. And of course, right away, me being me, I wanted to run a walleye event. So I started thinking about that right away. I let us get a handful of events under us first, just because there's always going to be those hiccups early on. And we ran our first Walleye Wars tournament, which is sort of my brainchild, back in August of last year. So it's really only a year old at this point. But as we speak right now, we're in the middle of our 8th tournament, Walleye Wars tournament. So it's kind of growing pretty quick. But yeah, that's the quick history, I guess, of Anglers Atlas and MyCatch. But yeah, we do, Logan especially, we use it interchangeably. It's the same company. We are trying to say MyCatch a lot more now, because I think that's becoming what we're known for, and that's the business that we're working on. So I'll probably refer to it as MyCatch, but yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things before I started. Like, I had the Anglers Atlas app and I had the MyCatch app on my phone, and I guess one of the things, the reason or the way that my resume got there was we were out at the lake one day and was obviously subscribed to the emails from Anglers Atlas, and there was one sent out looking for a position for a national accounts manager, and there was like 3 requirements. There was like 1 I didn't meet, 2 I didn't meet, but 3 was you must enjoy fishing, and I like fishing. So I saw that, and we were out at the lake, and my grandma and uncle were out there, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, kind of thing. I was like, but no idea what that even is, right? And so they kind of got to talking, like, well, you put a resume in, you never know, right? And so I put that in. Obviously that wasn't going to happen, but then I think it was you, Dallas, right, that reached out to me a couple months later about the socials and whatnot, right?
Yeah, I think I remember that process. We were really trying to find the right person for that national accounts position, and we never ended up actually filling that position. We went a different direction and filled other positions around it. And one of those was the social. We needed that social person. It's, as you know, probably better than anybody, Logan. The time that goes, I think the time can be really understated that goes into that and doing it properly, and the effort there. And the thing with Anglers Atlas is we are a small team. Of course, I just said Anglers Atlas instead of MyCatch, but the group is a really small team. The group's a small team, and we have our titles, but we wear multiple hats. Everybody does, Logan included. And we kind of, obviously with this tournament stuff, the social media side of things became really important and a big part of the business, and we needed somebody to kind of take that on full time. And take it off our plates, essentially. The social media side of Anglers Atlas and MyCatch was lacking, to say the least, up until that point. But because we were so focused on the mapping and stuff before, there wasn't, there's always a need for social media, but it wasn't anything like it is now. So Logan came in and kind of filled that role for us and has done a great job. So that was time kind of flown by. It doesn't seem like that long ago, but I guess that was a while ago now.
No. Yeah, that's what, anytime someone asks, like, when I'd say this is what I do for like a part-time job kind of thing, it's like, what is that? And I was like, if it's someone that's fished, I was like, have you ever not known anything about a lake? So you go to Google and you search up that lake. I was like, what's the first link that always comes up? And for me, before working there, it was always Angler's Atlas, and like it had the content from other people that had fished it, like whether like look out for these rocks or this is the kind of fish in there. You could confirm what species you caught in there. And for me being younger, not knowing as many people that fished at the time, it was kind of like my main resource at the time. Like not every lake had a bunch on it, but you could really get some good information. And then like you said, some of the maps that were there, like some of the stuff that I found even for Buffalo Pound was like stuff I'd never seen before. And so that's kind of where I first found it. Was I'd look up some little pothole in the middle of nowhere in the province, and all of a sudden it'd be, oh, there's Angler's Atlas, they have a page for this lake, and just go and check that stuff out. But I think that's probably how lots of people have seen it too.
Yeah, I think if you were to ask,
it's crazy that you.
Sorry, I cut you off.
Oh no, go ahead there, Dallas.
I think if you were to ask 10 random people what's Angler's Atlas, probably 2 or 3 of them would know what it is, but most of them would recognize it once they saw the page. And that, to Logan's point, most of our web traffic comes from, I want to learn more about Tobin Lake. So I search Tobin Lake in Google, and one of the first things that comes up, and one of the most informative ones that comes up, is the Angler's Atlas page for that water body. So I think that's how most people would recognize the Angler's Atlas side of things. It's the MyCatch brand being so much newer. We're really trying to promote that as a brand much more heavily than we did on the Angler's Atlas side, which is a big part of what Logan does as well. So,
yeah, I think the thing that I guess for a timeline of this, maybe we should kind of explain the MyCatch app. Like we can both kind of explain how that works, and then kind of talk about how that then feeds into the tournaments. Do you think that would make sense?
Yep, for sure.
Yeah. So basically, when I was using, oh yeah, you go.
No, sorry, I got a bit of a delay here, so you go ahead.
No, that's fine. I was just gonna say for my own personal use, I was using MyCatch because when my first phone that I had was like a Samsung Link, and so I had a notes tab in there, and when I was out on Buffalo, every time I catch a walleye, add that to the list kind of thing. And so that's how I was keeping my logs. And then so I tried to look up something just to see, like, is there something that can keep track of this better? And then that's what ended up coming up was MyCatch. And then so I started looking into that more. And then, like you mentioned earlier, with those logs, I guess we should really say one of our biggest things with MyCatch is the secret spots stay secret, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a bit different than some of the other companies out there where premium members can pay and see spots and stuff like that. There's no function like that with MyCatch. All that stuff is kept under lock and key, I guess, metaphorically, if you want that for technology and stuff. But basically keeping these logs, and I could say like, oh, I caught this brown trout, like even going fly fishing, I caught this brown trout in this stream, and it's keeping track of that for me. But then it's also building that database of knowledge just by basically a byproduct of someone keeping their logs. And now you have this vast, I guess, database of where fish are being caught and kind of size if you want and stuff like that. So that was kind of what really got me hooked on it. And I guess you'd know more of like the technical side with it, right?
Yeah, well, and essentially like, the app, the MyCatch app and the Angler's Atlas website are 2 distinct properties, but they do work in harmony. And that's especially true in the tournaments. One of the biggest differences on the tournament side with the other catch flow release apps that people would be familiar with is that we don't host the tournaments on the app. We use the app for all of the recording and fish submitting, and etc. And the leaderboards are visible on the app, but the tournaments themselves are hosted on the Angler's Atlas website. So when you register for a tournament, you do that online on a browser. At the Angler's Atlas website in the tournament section, you pick your tournament, pay your entry fee online, etc. Once you register, everything else after that point is done on the app. and it all feeds back into the system, which shows up both on the app and on the site. So it's a little bit confusing to explain that, but essentially every tournament we do is hosted on the site, but every tournament uses the app to deal with all the fish, and you use the app when you're out in the boat. And from the angler's perspective, the only thing you do on the website is register. Beyond that, everything else is done on the app. So
yeah, I think that's the huge thing that app allows you to do is like, cause like me and Brandon, I don't know if you've heard much about our tournament experience through the podcast, but basically we both fished our first one this year, and it was the Buffalo Pound tournament. And obviously that's one with you get your 5 or whatever, and you go and get your weights, right? But the big difference here with the MyCatch tournaments is that they're catch photo release. So this by
and
using
prior to this year, last year, I did a Walleye Wars, one of the ice fishing ones, and so that was technically my first
True.
experience with a tournament, but it wasn't like the whole tournament experience. But obviously Walleye Wars was still new. I think it was the second or third one. And you know what, it was really enjoyable. So, I mean, it's super easy to use, and I think that's what it comes down to is usability. I mean, you want to create something that's going to be functional, easy to use for people, that it's going to make it enjoyable. And then obviously with COVID, right, that was the perfect time for you guys to go all in on this. And, over the last year, it's just crazy that, it's only been a year and we're already on number 8 of Walleye Wars. And I feel like people have been talking about it for years, but it's only been one. It's just, obviously social media has a huge effect to that as well. So it's crazy.
Well, and you said something there too that is really important to me. So, and I've told this story 100 times, but when I started Walleye Wars, my original idea, we knew it was going to be catch photo release, obviously, because of the technology. But beyond that, my main focus was I just want to do something radically different. Like I said, I've fished tournaments my whole life, every year for 23, 24 years. And, by and large, it's the same format. It's 2 days, 4 or 5 fish total by weight. Essentially, there's different rules for every tournament, but essentially that's your format. So when I was thinking about starting Walleye Wars and what I wanted to do, my main thing was just be different, do something totally different and unique, kind of just disrupt the system and just try something new. That was the original goal. But very quickly I realized after we started doing this and started tweaking things, like our first 4 tournaments all had somewhat different formats, just because we were kind of playing with things and finding out what worked and what didn't. And, it was new to us too. Yep. And then the last 4 have essentially been the same format because we kind of found our sweet spot, and we're still going to keep tweaking, obviously, but by and large, we've kind of found how to do this now. But after that first tournament, initially it was all about being different, but I found out very quickly that there was something more important here, and it was growing tournament anglers, or making more tournament anglers out of casual, recreational type anglers who wouldn't otherwise fish a tournament. And that, to your point of, that was your first tournament you fished, we've seen a lot of that. And I think that's become really important because, I don't want to sound like I'm, being all high and mighty that I'm trying to, save tournament fishing or anything like that. But, when it comes down to it, generally speaking, the tournament scene has aged with time. So, when my dad started fishing tournaments, when they became a thing, back in the late 80s, early 90s, it was generally, men in their early to mid 30s. Now, 30 years later, it's men in their, 60s, because it's the same group of people. They just aged 30 years. Now, there's been new people come in, obviously, like people like myself and many others, but the number of me's is a lot less than the number of those people that have been doing it forever. So, I think there's a strong need to grow tournament. If we want to see these tournaments around in 20, 25 years, not just Walleye Wars, but the traditional tournaments that I fish and that I love doing, we need to get more people interested and get more people in. And I think I can go down a rabbit hole here too, but I think that the biggest thing that's changed in the last decade or 15 years for sure is the barrier to entry has gotten that much higher, and it's that much harder to get in. because everybody's got a $100,000 boat behind an $80,000 truck, and they got 15 grand in gear plus, and then you got to have the time, and the entry fees have gotten higher. So for somebody who's never fished a tournament before, how do you jump in and do that without feeling like you're?
It's intimidating.
It's intimidating, right? So I'm the exception because I got lucky. I was born into it, and I just had the right dad essentially to get into it. Most people aren't like that. So, what this all comes back to, I suppose, is that I think that Walleye Wars serves a unique purpose in introducing people to tournaments for the first time. I like to think of it as a healthy mix of, we want the seasoned vets who haven't, the guys who fish for 20 plus years, we want those guys in it too, because it makes the competition higher. But most importantly, we want the other half of the field to be first timers or people that are just getting into it. And, they're competing against the guys that they've watched on the leaderboards for all those years. And they can do it without having to invest all that stuff we've talked about. Like, the perfect example was Walleye Wars 3 back in the fall, October of 2020. That was our largest tournament yet. We were 95% full. And the winning fish was 84 centimeters, which I believe is over 33 inches. That fish was caught offshore. Wow. So that's the perfect illustration of what I just said, is that, you don't need all of those other things. You pay your $250 entry fee, which is, half or considerably less than that of what your typical entry fee would be for most of the large tournaments. But you can still win, up to $10,000. And you can win it offshore. You can win it on a 12-foot aluminum boat. You can't do that in most of the tournaments that I fish. I mean, you could, in theory, you always could, but realistically, you can't. You can't compete with what everybody else has. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure I said for sure is that I know that there's at least a few people out there who think that I'm trying to destroy, traditional weight-based tournaments and replace it with this. That's never been my goal, and in fact, that goes against what I want, because those are the tournaments that I fish. I don't fish Walleye Wars. I don't, because I just know that would just be a can of worms. I don't want to go down that road. I don't want to fish my own tournaments, but I still want to fish tournaments. And the tournaments that I fish are those traditional weight-based tournaments. I fish the Premiers 15 times, the Vanity, the SWT tournaments, all of that. I want those around because I want to fish them. But where I feel that I can make a difference and I can help with Walleye Wars, and the MyCatch team can make a difference, is by introducing more people to the tournament scene. Because if somebody like you, Brandon, fishes Walleye Wars for the first time, does well, maybe makes a little bit of money, you're going to probably do it again. You do that a few times, suddenly your confidence levels up, maybe your finances have gone up, all of these things like that factor into that, and maybe you're going to start fishing. You might start fishing, the buffalo pounds and the landings and the elbows and so on and so forth, and then we've done our job in introducing you to that scene, essentially. So that's really, when it boils down to it, I think that's what Walleye Wars is here for. I think that's the purpose it serves, is and it's a selfish thing too. I want there to be, I want the Premiers and the Vanity to have 160 teams 20 years from now, 25 years from now. But the reality is that the average age of those tournaments today is probably well into their 50s and 60s. So you have to get more people involved, and I think that's what we're doing. So.
Yeah, I think that sorry, Brian, one of the important things, like you said, there probably is some people that think that you're trying to change how things go, but we've mentioned it twice now with how many tournaments you've been in. And I guess you're pretty humble, because we haven't mentioned how many you or your dad has won. So with the way that I see your name or your dad's name always near the top, I don't know why people would think you'd want to get rid of those tournaments, because you guys obviously do quite well. So I guess you might not like talking about it, but for you and your dad, what do your numbers look like? Like, we had Tim Jenny on here, and he was kind of the same. He didn't want to mention it too much, but I guess for finishes, what does it look like for you guys?
I'll start by saying my dad's resume is light years further than mine. He's fished essentially all of the Saskatchewan tournaments since they've existed. He won the very first elbow tournament. back when it started. I think he's did the first Last Mountain tournament. I know he's the only person who's done every premiers. He's never missed the Vanity. So he's got an extensive resume, but him and I together, we've done quite well. The premiers seems to be our tournament. I'm not sure what it is. It's my favorite tournament. I know it's his favorite tournament too. Not just because we've historically done well there, but it's just always been, that's our thing. That's our father-son thing that we've always done together. And so him and I have won the premiers 3 times, and he won it once before that in 99, I think it was, with Brian Koshin from Swift Current. So he's the only 4-time winner, and I'm the only 3-time winner of premiers. So that's always been our tournament. Beyond that, I won Reed Lake, the Duncarron tournament, when I was 9. So I guess that's one too. Those are the only ones I've won, but we've made money. I've placed at the Landing a handful of times, and Elbow. But that's basically the resume. I don't fish. I've never fished 5, 6, 7 tournaments a year, just because I was either a kid, or I was in high school, or I was in university, or now I have a family. I can't. The misconception with traditional tournaments is that it's a weekend, it's a 2-day thing. Well, not if you want to do well. It's not. When we go to fish premiers, yes, the premiers is on a Friday and Saturday, but we go up on Monday and fish that entire week, and then stay an extra day at the end, and it's a full week. So there's no way in the foreseeable future or the last 10 years that I can take 5, 6, 7 weeks a summer and do that. So I don't fish nearly as many tournaments as either some people might think, or nearly as many as my dad does, but I've been lucky enough to get some results and make a bit of a resume. So
yeah, well, and I think there you go, Brandon.
Well, I was just going to say, regardless, I mean, obviously you guys enjoy them, you guys do well at them, and you guys are going to be around for a while, especially yourself. I mean, right, you're young, you're going to try help grow the traditional tournament scene as well. But if we take a step back and just kind of talk about what you were talking about before we hopped into this topic, and how your goal was to introduce new anglers to the tournament scene and get new young anglers into it. I mean, really, that's really what the Weekend Warriors Fishing Podcast is all about. I mean, that's what we are. We are your casual, average Joe anglers that, a year, 2 years ago, stumbled upon, Walleye Wars, entered it, really got a passion going for fishing, and from there it's really grown, right? So that's, if that was your goal, I mean, we're living proof of that, and I mean, that's our goal as well with this podcast is just to encourage not just young anglers as a whole, to continuously learn, step outside your comfort zone, and really just do what you want to do. Don't be discouraged by intimidation of tournament anglers that maybe have won all the tournaments in the province or whatnot. If you want to get into tournament angling, there's nothing better than sitting down, watching some videos, listening to some podcasts, and learning from some of the best in the province. So
yeah, and I think I just want to say it again too. Like, of course, I want to see guys like you keep re-entering Walleye Wars and helping us grow Walleye Wars. But really, what the long-term goal is that I want to see people start in Walleye Wars, and then I want to see them on the stage at the Vanity. Like that's the goal. I have no plans or no goal of taking anything away from those. It's really about the term that I use all the time on whether we're talking to prospective anglers or whether we're talking to sponsors. Should mention that too. We've been very lucky to have some very high quality sponsors come on board. And it might not seem like it or might not feel like it for me, and for other people who've grow up with it over the last year. But Walleye Wars is only a year old. A year ago, before August 1st of last year, it didn't exist, and since then we've had multiple sponsorships with Tourism Saskatchewan in a big way. The NFA, National Firearms Association, sponsored one of our events last year. We've had Powertran came aboard. You know, we've had fishing holes stepped up in a big way this year all across for the entire series. So Alberta Marine in Alberta has gotten us off the ground in Alberta. So we've had some very good sponsors kind of believe in what we're doing too. But the message that I keep telling them and the message that I tell to the anglers, and what I wanted to say on here too, is that the phrase I use all the time is bridging the gap. And because I believe there is a gap between, you know, the weekend warrior and the pro tournament angler. There is a gap there, and it's hard to make that jump. So I think Walleye Wars slots in the middle there, and I certainly don't view Walleye Wars as like a minor leagues or like a feeder system necessarily to the big leagues. I still consider it big league, and I want it to feel big league. Then that's why I still want those competitive anglers that have historically done those tournaments. I want them too, but the phrase I use all the time is bridge the gap. I want to make it so that somebody like a Brandon can, you know, fish by fishing Walleye Wars, gain the confidence and the knowledge and the you know, the finances and whatever else that goes into it, to then take the next step and start not only continue to fish Walleye Wars but also fish those other tournaments too. So that bridging the gap is something that I say over and over and over again, and I think it really, in 3 words, kind of sums up what the Walleye Wars goal is, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think that's like when you mentioned that there might be some people thinking that you're trying to compete. It's like, well, like it's not like you're putting the Walleye Wars on the same weekends as these tournaments. Like I know people have their opinions, and as you clearly know and have dealt with this, there's lots of people that you're never gonna make them happy, and they're never gonna change their mind. But I just see it as it's another opportunity. Like you win one Walleye Wars, you're feeling pretty good, right? Like you're fishing, like you said, against some very good anglers. You've made a nice chunk of change as well, which for lots of us might get reinvested into that rig that you're eventually going to take out to the tournament, right? So it's kind of it's something that, and the biggest thing is too, like has it been every single? Well, there was one that was Last Mountain only, right?
Yeah, you're not limited to a body of water.
No, and like I mentioned earlier, the format was played with pretty heavily in the first 4 tournaments, and then the 4 we've done since then have kind of been standardized, and that was kind of the plan all along, is let's try new things intentionally and see. So the first tournament was it was 24 like Walleye Wars 1. We capped it at 24, so we didn't, and that tournament was actually never open. So it was basically, I personally approached 24 people that I considered to be high caliber tournament anglers, and I got them to sign up before anybody even knew what Walleye Wars was or was going to be. And so we never had an open registration. That was kind of an invitational, just to kind of proof of concept and for us to try things out. So that was the first tournament, and that was a month long. It was all of August of last year, 24 anglers, and it was the entire province of Saskatchewan. Ironically, that sort of became our model right from that first tournament, with a few exceptions, but we kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of what we wanted to achieve with the first one. The second tournament was essentially the pre-fish tournament for the Last Mountain Fall Walleye Classic last year. So instead of a month, it was 1 week, and it was only on Last Mountain, and it was only the registered anglers for Last Mountain Fall Walleye Classic. So again, not really a true open, because you had to be registered in the Last Mountain tournament to qualify for the pre-fish Walleye Wars tournament. Walleye Wars 3 was our first true, you know, okay, we've taken what we learned from the first 2, and now we're going to run an open tournament, so anyone can enter, 100 spots available. We're going to do it for 3 weeks in October after the Vanity, so all of the other major tournaments are over at that point, and we had a goal of 100, and we got 95, so we didn't quite fill, but we 95% full. And that was, keep in mind, that was in October, and you know, Walleye Wars didn't exist prior to August of last year, so it was only a couple of months old at that time. And that was really our showcase event, I suppose. That was the one that really set the stage for this year. Then we did Walleye Wars 4, which was the ice fishing one, Brandon, that you were in, which again, similar format, but obviously it's on ice, and did it over, I believe it was a 3-week period. So after those 4 tournaments, kind of, we took what we learned from all of them. We did poll. I polled everybody from the first 3 tournaments after Walleye Wars 1, 2, and 3 were over, just to kind of see what people liked and what people didn't. And that's how we got to where we are now. So generally speaking, the format for this year anyway, and we might make some changes for next year, but the format for this year was 10 days. So, and the 10 days is from a Friday to the following Sunday. So basically, you get 2 weekends with the week in between. And that was kind of chosen because you're trying to find that sweet spot between, if it's too long. The comment I kept hearing was, well, the retired guys who can fish every single day have too much of an advantage.
Yeah.
If it's too short, you're just like all the other tournaments, but there's also that freedom of choice and that freedom to move around. Like in Walleye Wars now, you can go to Last Mountain for a weekend, then you can go up to Tobin, then you can come fish the river for a while. Like you can move around. So if you have a 1 or 2 day event, that's not really possible. So all in all, the 10-day thing with the 2 weekends was kind of where we settled. And I think that I don't see a reason we're going to change that anytime soon. That's kind of been the perfect time limit. Entry fee, we kind of found right away with $250. Most of all of the tournaments that I fish are at least double that. So I wanted it to be high enough that the prize money is high enough that there's significant prizing, so you can attract both, the Brandons and the Logans, and also the Glenn Bomies and the guys like my dad and those types who've fished and won and want to compete for real money. So that's where we settled there, and that's another thing I don't see changing. I like it fits right in the middle, and that bridge the gap type thing I keep talking about. That makes sense. So yeah, that's been generally the format for the last 4 tournaments here, and we've had a few rule changes here and there. And the other thing that we didn't maybe anticipate right away was the first 4 tournaments were in Saskatchewan. The last 4 have been spread out. This year we're running tournaments in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario. With each province comes a new set of restrictions for licensing. So there's certain things you have to tweak tournament to tournament, but we've been able to stick to that format of 10 days, $250, Friday to Sunday, top 10 payout, etc. So, yeah, it's been good. There's not a whole lot we want to change. There's a few things, especially around the prizing, that I think we might tweak for next year, but I want to poll everybody. Like that's a majority wins type thing. It makes no difference to me. I just want to do what makes the biggest group of people happy for that type of prizing and payouts and stuff like that. But beyond that, I think the format of the 10 days, the $250 is kind of where we want to be there. So
yeah. I think that's another important thing to mention quickly, just before you go, Brandon. There was that the big thing. I don't want to say, because I don't know about the other companies that run tournaments as well necessarily, but all of our tournaments that we're running have the proper licensing and whatnot like that, like all the legal requirements, I guess, correct, that are needed for those tournaments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wherever required, we have a CF. Most provinces call them CFE, so competitive fishing event license. Every province is different. Every province has different restrictions. Every province has a different application process. So that's been a fun part of my job, is figuring all of that out. I think we at least know now what to expect. But yeah, that's very important to us. We want to do everything above board, especially because, and this was true especially for Saskatchewan, but I think for everywhere, is that catch photo release tournaments are so new overall. Not just MyCatch, but also the other apps that people are familiar with. That when the rules were written, they weren't really written with catch photo release in mind. So many of these provinces are now, especially in the last year, rewriting and tweaking their rules and their guidelines for what is and isn't acceptable. And we're, guinea pig sounds negative, but we're essentially, in a way, we're helping them with that process, because they're learning what works and doesn't work for them as well. So it was very important for us to be, on good and legal and proper terms with them from day one. I'm not here to take anything away from anybody else, but I know that there's been tournaments ran without that proper licensing before, and they essentially, people have gotten away with it either because they didn't know, or because the rules were such that that the governments didn't know how to deal with them either. So that's all changing now, and I'm proud of the way that we handled that, because we've made sure that even though it is a headache sometimes, and even though it means a lot of extra time and effort and getting, tweaking wording and stuff like that, it's worth it in the end to be on good terms with those guys and to make sure that everything we're doing is above board with what the performance wants to. So
yeah.
No, and that's very important as well, obviously. And it's important too. Like, you guys aren't just Walleye Wars, right? You guys have expanded into other tournament scenes and species as well. Like, you have the bass battles down at Boundary. Just recently this year, right? Shayna, our first guest on the podcast, she joined you guys over on your team, and I think she's the one kind of heading the multi-species madness.
Yep, that's her. That's all her. She's leaned on myself, and I guess the other member of the team I should mention too that is an integral part of the tournament's business is Jim Clark. Jim was one of the founding members of the SAWT, the Southern Alberta Walleye Trail. He's out of Calgary now, so he fishes lots in Alberta and also non-walleye stuff in BC and in the States as well. But really, on the tournament side at Anglers Atlas and MyCatch, it comes down to myself and Jim and Shayna primarily, and then our boss and president Sean as well. So, but yeah, Walleye Wars was kind of Walleye Wars is to me what multi-species madness is to Shayna. That's her baby, and that was her brainchild. And it's interesting too because even though I don't fish Walleye Wars and she doesn't fish MSM, we've designed those tournaments for ourselves essentially. Like, I created with Walleye Wars what I would want to fish that achieves all those other things we've talked about. But I wanted to create a pro to semi-pro walleye series because that's what I do. Shayna wanted to create a multi-species tournament because that's what she's into. So that's the kind of the fun part of our jobs, and the fun part of growing this is that we've all gotten to do these projects that we wanted to do. And Shayna's done a great job for us. I've known her a few years now just through the tournament scene with her working with the research group and stuff. And then when she came available, we scooped her up right away, and it's been a good addition to the team. And she was never really meant to get into running tournaments, but like I said before, we wear multiple hats, and the opportunity was there. So she's done a really good job with that. And the second multi-species madness is just about to start here in Ontario, so that'll be really interesting to see too. It's a whole new world out there, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and Tara will be fishing that one as well, so that should be interesting.
But yeah, with everything as a whole, you guys are very well rounded as a company and touching a lot of different anglers across Canada that maybe favorite certain species. We were a sponsor for bass battles here in Boundary Dam, and I was fortunate enough to meet up with one of the winners that won one of our prize. I think his name was Brian, and just talking to him, he's super passionate about largemouth, and he said he's like, basically that's the only body of water that I'll fish in Saskatchewan because I'm a bass freak, and so for him, he doesn't fish the Walleye Wars. So at least you guys are providing something for those bass anglers, or those we had Rylan Parrott on the episode previous to this. He was one of the guys that was leading the first multi-species madness event here in Saskatchewan. So there's guys like him that just absolutely love to chase fish of all kinds across the province, and they did a fantastic job. I think they got 19 species in whatever it was 10 days. But you guys are providing a tournament scene for not just walleye anglers, but for all ages and multi-species anglers across Canada. So I think it's just fantastic what you guys are doing.
Yeah, and we've talked almost exclusively about our MyCatch brand events too. Like we own all the brands we talked about: Walleye Wars, Bass Battles, MSM. But we also do a lot of partnered events. Like you can come to the MyCatch team and essentially do a partnered event. Some of the biggest ones we've done recently. Back in June we did the Cold Lake Fishing Derby, which was 250 people. It filled. Big lake trout tournament out there over a weekend, and that was a partnered event with 50-50 between MyCatch and the Cold Lake Tourism City of Cold Lake. So that makes up a significant portion of the events that we're doing too. It's not just our own tournaments, it's also all these other ones that we're, essentially helping out with, and letting them use the MyCatch platform and that type of thing. So between everything, like we've done, lake trout and walleye, and really the one we haven't done yet is pike. And we've talked about it since day one, and I really want to do something there. But you know what the hardest part is about doing a pike tournament that's catch, foot, release? Nobody has a board long enough to measure them. That's the biggest problem. So,
yeah. But I feel like you've provided boards in the past.
Well, at a cost.
Yeah, but most of the walleye guys have a 36-inch board, which, I mean, that's a big pike, but probably not big enough.
Yeah.
Not big enough.
Yeah, that's the hardest part.
No, we at least need a 47.
In all honesty.
Yeah, no, it would be. I'd love to do one. That's the hardest. One of our restrictions, I suppose, is that we essentially have to be measure based, and with that in mind, pike and muskie and fish like that, like measuring becomes an issue, but there's got to be ways around it. So I'm confident we'll do something with pike in the near future, but that's the biggest hurdle there. That one other thing that reminds me too that I wanted to make sure I touched on while I was on here. I know that one of the biggest hurdles that I've faced specifically with Walleye Wars is people being concerned about the possibility to cheat. Obviously, there is no perfect platform out there. There's no perfect set of rules. Every tournament, you could show me the rules to any tournament anywhere, and I could probably find half a dozen ways to cheat in that tournament. It's, fishing tournaments, I think, are always going to have an element of sportsmanship. Obviously, it's the goal of the organizers to reduce those chances as much as possible and those opportunities so that you can, not have to deal with that, but there's always going to be something there. But specifically with Walleye Wars, I think people think of that right away, mostly because it's different. When something new comes along or when something's different, the first thing people are going to do is, poke holes in it and say, okay, well, this is the problem. How do you address this? Essentially, my answer is always that there's really one way to cheat in Walleye Wars, and everybody who spends a minute reading it can figure it out. The biggest problem that we could potentially have with a Walleye Wars format is sharing fish. So, Brandon, you enter Walleye Wars, and you take Logan out in the boat with you, and Logan catches a monster, and you record it as your own. Essentially, that's the problem that we face, and especially because Walleye Wars is province-wide, you don't have all the other boats around you to kind of self-police that. So, obviously, that's the biggest issue we face. Now, with that in mind, we structured our rules in a way and our pricing in a way that really mitigates that, I feel. It's never going to be perfect, but we're going to continue adjusting pricing and the rules to make that as less of an issue as possible. But at the end of the day, you're always relying on some level of sportsmanship. I know for me, like, when I think about fishing tournaments, now I know that everybody doesn't have this, but I think generally speaking, people who fish tournaments have the mentality of, like, the money's nice, but the wins are better. We talked about the premiers and stuff, and the premiers has become a pretty high money tournament. I've been lucky enough to make a decent amount of money on those premiers wins, but what I remember now from that is winning the tournaments. I don't remember what I did, with the money necessarily. So I would hope that that's kind of the general attitude that anglers have, and that's sort of the attitude that we want to foster with people getting into it, is that you want to win because you won, you don't want to cheat. So but the important thing I wanted to say too, though, is that I know that people point out the ways to cheat right away, and and again, nothing against the other tournaments at all, those are the tournaments that I fish, etc., but I would make the case that the traditional based tournaments have many more ways of cheat. We've seen it. Unfortunately, we see it every year, and we've seen it as recent as last year. There's clipping tails, there's letting fish, there's caging fish, there's false live wells, etc. Now, all of that stuff, there's, again, tournament organizers do everything they can to mitigate that. I think by and large, we've gotten a lot better at that in the last 10 years, but it still does happen, and if there's a way to cheat, somebody's always going to try it, and that's true for every tournament, including Walleye Wars, but I do feel that we've done a really good job of mitigating the possibilities there. And as I see it, there's essentially one way, and if we can focus on that and eliminate that as much as possible, then we can run as clean a tournament as we possibly can. And I don't personally believe we've had many issues at all with the Walleye Wars tournaments we've done so far, and that's, I suppose I owe a thank you to all the anglers that have chosen to, yourself included, Brandon, that have chosen to try out Walleye Wars, because it doesn't take many of those bad experiences to really damage a tournament, and we haven't had to deal with that yet. So thank you to the people who fished Walleye Wars.
Yeah, and I mean, with anything too, like a lot of it does come down to integrity and honesty, and just good sportsmanship. I mean, that's with any sport. There's ways around things, but I mean, what it comes down to is just we want to, us, Logan, and this podcast, but I mean, other anglers around the province too. I would hope that the goal here is to create an ethical experience and a future in the tournament angling scene for young and old, but just creating a good environment that everyone can be welcomed and can learn and hopefully win some money, create some memories, and move forward.
Yeah, and I think if anybody who does listen to the podcast who's considering getting into fishing tournaments, and I hope that I know that that's kind of your guys' audience, and I think that that's why I really wanted to come on and talk about this stuff, because I think that that's really the audience that we're cultivating with Walleye Wars and with our other tournaments. But yeah, the thing I would say there is just try it. Get in and try it, and ask questions. I get a lot of questions from experienced and non-experienced about clarifications on rules and that type of thing. I think something we do really well at MyCatch as a group is we're really the customer service level, the level of customer service and the individuality of having those conversations. We're not hard to talk to. Our door's always open, so to speak. Email, phone call, that type of thing. Please ask, and don't be afraid to, because we want those people, we want your audience essentially to try these tournaments out, and I want them to get into that and fish a vanity one day. So
yeah, I think that's a big thing. Like Brandon said, kind of we'd like to help people get into it. Well, this podcast was what got me into going to tournaments, right? Like I'd be out at the lake every time that at our cabin when the Buffalo Pound was happening, and I fished. Like I was looking back at some of my pictures, and we've had the fishing boat I have now, we've had it for 10 years, and I just remember always just going out there, and any time I could I was spending out in the water. And I was like, I think it would be kind of cool to do one of those tournaments. And then it was like, oh, well, that's pretty intimidating. Like, look at the guys out there. And then I worked it in 2017, volunteered at it, and I was kind of like, yeah, I think I want to do this. But then same thing, it kind of just got in the head again. But then when you listen to, like, say people that are listening, you listen to lots of the tournament anglers, you see they're nice, inviting. They're just like you and I kind of thing, right? And then kind of actually just, like you said, just get out there and just do it. Because there were so many years there where I was just like, oh, there goes all the boats again, and that'd be so cool. But then always kind of be like, I don't think I could do that. But like that fishing, just even the Buffalo Pound was a small one. It's a really good one to start off with, and that was some of the most fun I think I've ever had fishing. Just so many different things combined to make such a fun day. Whether, like, I was still having a ton of fun. We only had 4 fish with an hour and a half to go, and I was still having a ton of fun. And then it ended a lot better for us, but still, it's like it's some of the most fun I think that you can have fishing. Just the added challenge and I guess excitement with it all.
Yeah, and outside of Walleye Wars too, like some of my favorite parts of a tournament that I like fishing a tournament isn't even the fishing part of it. Like there's a lot that goes into that too. But probably my favorite moment outside of catching a 12-pounder, my favorite moment of a tournament is 30 seconds before the horn goes, when you got your entire flight of 40 boats floating in a marina together, and it's kind of dead calm, and it's 6 a.m. There's some fog on the water, and then the horn goes, and everybody's racing down the water to start a new tournament off. That's a pretty exhilarating feeling, and then you get out there, and time is money. It just changes. Like there's it's a whole different mindset, I guess, than just recreational fishing, and nothing wrong with that. Obviously, recreational fish for sure, but if you've ever wanted to try, I would just encourage you to try it out. And if you're worried about the other eyeballs and having not you're worried about that other people watching everything you're doing, you don't want to screw anything up. That's where I think that outside of just the financial barriers and all of that, where a Walleye Wars type format is a good place to start too, and just because you don't have that extra added pressure. And Brandon mentioned the buffalo pound. I would say too, like if you're looking to fish, just a quick shout out, if you're wanting to fish a traditional type tournament that is a little bit lower money but kind of another entry level type tournament, the Reed Lake Walleye Tournament, which is at Duncarron out in my area here at south of Swift Current, that's a great one too. That's the first tournament I fished, and yeah, I would highly recommend that. That happens every year in early July. So if you're in Saskatchewan, that's another one in addition to Buffalo Pound that I would recommend checking out. If you have future ambitions of fishing, SWT, Premier's Vanity, that type of thing, that's a good one.
Yeah, and I think the thing with that too, with like the eyeballs and starting off and everything, like definitely, like I was still very intimidated sitting around there, getting ready to take off in the morning, right? But it's with anything, you're gonna have some grumpy old guys too that are like, oh, look at these new guys stuff, but who cares about them, right? They've got some other bee in their bonnet that they're worried about, right? Maybe they're concerned that maybe you're going to come in there and beat them or something like that, but there's way more people that are way more welcoming. The number of people we talked to, whether it was like once the day had ended and we were waiting to go weigh in, like talked to like 4 or 5 different boats. There's actually some guys that said they followed me on the podcast and stuff, and they were waiting to weigh in, and I think it was their first time fishing it as well. So it's like there's so many people out there, you might not think it, but there's a lot of people out there in the exact same position as you. So just go and do it is the main thing.
Yeah, and there's options now too. Like in addition to Buffalo Pound and Duncarron, in addition to Walleye Wars, there's multi-species madness, there's bass battles, there's all of the non-MyCatch tournaments. I think the nice thing logistically about catch photo release tournaments, be it MyCatch or any of the other apps, there isn't nearly as much manpower needed to run them, and volunteers and everything else. So it allows for more events and more opportunities to get into it. So I don't think there's ever really been a better time to get into tournament fishing right now, because you have options. You can try different things, see what you like, see what you don't, and I would definitely encourage people to take that next step. I know the year is running out on us already here, but if you can't get into one this fall, there's a lot going on next year. I know just on our plate for sure, but I know that everybody else has got stuff going on too, so you won't be shy on opportunities.
Yeah.
There you go. We've had you for just over an hour now, Dallas. Is there anything else that you want to touch on or mention, while we got you on here?
No, I don't think so. The next, like I said, we're in Walleye Wars 8 right now, which is a Saskatchewan-based, it's our first Saskatchewan tournament of the year, so it's also kind of the 1-year anniversary of starting Walleye Wars. So that tournament's ongoing right now. We had a couple of big fish. I know you guys have shared them on your platforms as well. We've had a couple of over 80s already, just on the first weekend.
Yeah,
so
massive.
That's follow along walleyewars.com. You can follow that tournament. Then we have for the rest of the year, there's 2 more tournaments. There's Walleye Wars 9, which is in Alberta. That's in September. And again, like Logan said earlier, I try really hard not to step on any other toes with tournaments, so we weave in and out of the schedule wise too. So if you're in Alberta in September, be sure to look up Walleye Wars 9, and then the 1-year anniversary of the fall tournament, we're doing Walleye Wars 10 Fall Brawl back in Saskatchewan on starting Thanksgiving weekend, which is the week after the Vanity. So that's what's on schedule for Walleye Wars. For myself, I'm very much looking forward to the Vanity this year. I missed premieres this year for the first time in 15 years because my second son was born just before that, so I had to pull out for
Congratulations.
For 1 year.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. So I will be back next year for sure. Like I said before, that is my favorite tournament. But I'm going to make up for it and fish the Vanity this year, and that is always a nice one to do well at, so fingers crossed.
Is that with your dad?
No, this year he's been fishing the Vanity with Ryan Tinning from Swift Current, so I am fishing with another guy from the area this year. So it'll be my first time fishing together. So it'll be the first time fishing against my dad at Nipawin too. So we'll see how that goes.
Oh, some stiff competition there.
Yes.
Well, we'll be following along, see which Kirkpatrick beats the other. So.
Yeah, I got to make my own name, I guess. I like like Logan said, I have been lucky enough to have some wins and stuff, but it's also in a large part thanks to having a very good fisherman as a father. So hoping to do some damage on my own now as well. So.
Yeah, and I guess quickly before we let you go, we should mention, like, obviously we talked heavily about the Walleye Wars, but be sure to check out the Anglers Atlas website and under the tournaments tab to see what else is going on. Like Dallas mentioned, we do partner up with other places, like lots of towns and stuff like that for tournaments. So you can check that tab and see if there's a tournament happening near you. It might not necessarily be a multi-species madness or a Walleye Wars, something like that, but there is lots of other tournaments that go on. Lots of them do include multiple species, so you can check that out and see kind of what's happening around your area. We always have at least a couple tournaments going on, so be sure to check that out as well.
Yeah, you can just go to anglersatlas.com/tournaments. It's just going to show you everything that's either live or upcoming. There's also a past tournaments tab. You can see everything that's happened in the past. But every one of those tournaments is, if you click on the tournament tab or on the tournament itself, there's a dedicated page for that tournament. That's where you're going to find the live leaderboards, the full list of the rules, prizing, etc. So be sure to check that out. And it doesn't, we're Canada wide, and we even have ran 2 tournaments in Alaska since we started. So I'm sure that if you are interested, and you'll find something in your area on there, so be sure to check it out.
For sure. Well, I guess
fantastic.
Yeah, thank you very much for hopping on with us. It was good to kind of get even though I worked there, it was awesome to get an even more in-depth look at Walleye Wars and kind of all the happenings there. And I guess best of luck in the Vanity as well. I'm sure we'll be following that one along on social media and whatnot, so it should be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, I'm praying for good weather. Last time I fished the Vanity, it was -13 on the Saturday and snowing, so I'd rather not do that this time, but we will see. We'll be there regardless. So,
well, all the best to you, and obviously hope to see a lot more from MyCatch and your name up on the leaderboard and a lot more tournaments.
Thank you guys for having me on.